My name is William Edward, and this episode is about the year everything inside me finally lined up with the life I was building on the outside. People think growth is something you achieve and then move on from, but I have learned that growth is something you wake up and choose again and again, even when you are tired of choosing, especially when you are tired of choosing. After I accepted the role of mentor at the warehouse, I didn't feel qualified. I felt like an actor who had wandered onto the wrong stage. But I kept showing up anyway, because showing up had become my new religion. I remembered a version of myself that used to avoid responsibility, because responsibility had once felt like a trap. Now it felt like a doorway. The first group of young employees sat in front of me with notebooks and coffee cups, pretending they weren't nervous. They were in their early 20s, the age when life still feels like a long hallway of unlocked doors. They asked me about promotions, about money, about how to get ahead. I listened to their questions and heard echoes of my own past, but instead of giving them instructions, I gave them stories. I told them about being invisible. I told them about parking lots and empty searches on my phone. I told them about 10 quiet minutes that changed the direction of my life. Something unexpected happened as I spoke. The more I described my mistakes, the lighter I felt. It was as if every confession loosened another knot inside me. For decades, I had treated my struggles like stains I needed to hide. Now I realized they were scars that proved I had healed. As months passed, I noticed a change, not just in them, but in myself. I was no longer the man who merely reacted to life. I was becoming someone who shaped it, not in dramatic ways, but in daily ones. I learned to listen without interrupting. I learned to pause before assuming the worst. I learned that leadership is not about answers, but about presence. There were still nights when fear tried to move back in. It came disguised as logic. It told me I was wasting time, that no one really cared about my story, that I was too late to make a difference. But I had become fluent in recognizing that voice. I no longer argued with it. I thanked it for trying to protect me and continued anyway. One evening, I stayed late after work, sitting alone in the break room with a stack of feedback forms from the mentorship program. One note stopped me. It said, "You talk about your mistakes like they're lessons, not shame." I didn't know that was allowed. I read that sentence over and over, feeling something open in my chest that had been closed for most of my life. Allowed. That word stayed with me. How many things had I not allowed myself to feel, to want, to become? I thought about my childhood. About my father coming home from the factory with hands so cracked they bled. About my mother collapsing into a chair after cleaning offices all night. They had survived, they had provided, but no one had taught them how to dream, and so they never taught me. I realized I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was rewriting a family story. That realization led me back to writing, not just in my notebook, but on my computer. At first it was clumsy, short paragraphs about ordinary days. Small reflections about fear and courage and time. I didn't share them. They were just for me. But they did something powerful. They turned my experiences into meaning. Writing showed me patterns I had never noticed before. I saw how often I had chosen safety over growth, how often I had mistaken patience for paralysis. I also saw something kinder, how resilient I had always been, even when I didn't feel brave. One Saturday, I attended a local community event about adult education. I didn't plan to speak. I planned to sit in the back and leave early. But during the open discussion, someone asked why so many adults feel it's too late to start over. My heart started beating in my ears. Without thinking, I raised my hand. I stood up and said my name. I told them I was 40-something years old and had spent most of my life believing that change belonged to younger people. I told them about 10 minutes in the morning. I told them about forgiving myself. I told them that no one wakes up suddenly ready. They wake up tired and choose to try anyway. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped, then another. Afterward, people came up to me, not to praise, but to share. A woman told me she wanted to go back to school, but was afraid of looking foolish. A man told me he hated his job, but didn't know how to leave. I listened and felt something I had never felt before. Usefulness that had nothing to do with productivity. That night, I didn't search how to restart life. I searched how to help others restart theirs. The more I leaned into this new identity, the more I understood that motivation is not a feeling. It is a decision repeated until it becomes character. There were mornings I wanted to skip my quiet time. There were days I wanted to stop trying to lead. But I didn't. Not because I was disciplined, but because I had finally found something worth protecting. My relationships changed too. I called my parents more often. I asked questions I had never asked. I told them about the mentorship program, about the classes, about the writing. They didn't always understand, but they were proud in a quiet way that reminded me of home. I also learned to let go of people who were not growing with me. That was painful. Some friendships survive stagnation, but not change. I stopped trying to drag anyone forward. I walked my path and trusted that the right people would meet me there. 1 year after my promotion, I stood in the same parking lot where I once searched how to restart life. The place looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had grown. I sat in my car and smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. If you have followed my story this far, I want you to understand something. I am not special. I am not exceptional. I am a man who got tired of waiting for a life that was never coming to rescue him. You don't need a dramatic transformation. You don't need applause. You don't need a clean past. You need permission. And this time, you don't need it from me. You need it from yourself.